It happened just before sunset rush hour, red lights stretching for miles, and the world breathing fire from exhaust pipes. Caleb and Iris were arguing about dinner chicken or Chinese when something blurred past the rearview mirror. A filthy shape, a flash of motion. Then came the sound, claws on metal, a thump, and before either could scream, a German shepherd leapt straight through the open back window. He didn't growl, he didn't bark. He just curled up, shaking, silent, as if every rib knew what it meant to be hunted, as if this was the last car he'd ever try. No tags, no collar, no pursuit. Just fear and a desperate kind of hope. They should have pushed him out. Instead, they looked at each other and left the window open. The city pulsed in amber and exhaust as the sun slipped behind the high-rises, bathing every glass pane and metal fender in golden glare, the kind of light that made everything look softer, even if nothing really was. Caleb adjusted his grip on the steering wheel, wrist aching from the weight of the day. His shirt clung to his back, damp with the mix of sweat and stress that came from unloading crates all afternoon under flickering warehouse lights. Iris sat beside him, slouched low in the seat, her chin resting on a hand stained with smudged charcoal. She hadn't spoken in 10 minutes, lost in her own haze of fatigue and paint fumes. They weren't talking, but the silence between them wasn't heavy. It was just familiar. The kind of quiet that built up over years of long hours and not enough money, shared between people who knew when words didn't help anyway. A soft indie playlist played low on the radio, some acoustic cover Iris had added to their shared playlist months ago. It looped beneath the noise of traffic, honks, idling engines, the occasional curse from another driver swallowed by their closed windows. Caleb tapped the steering wheel absently, eyes scanning the lanes. "We'll be home in 15 if this clears." Iris gave a half nod, not really caring. She reached over and turned the air conditioning one notch higher. "Feels like August in here." "It is August." "Yeah, well, it feels like August inside my spine." Caleb chuckled under his breath, the kind of sound you make when laughter is too expensive but still worth trying. They inched forward down Glenwood Avenue, passing the same gas station, the same boarded-up pawn shop, the same bus bench with the same weather-worn ad for injury lawyers. The city never stopped reminding them they were just extras in someone else's script. Up ahead, the traffic light turned yellow. Caleb slowed, stopped. Iris stared out the window, eyes glazed. A kid on a scooter zipped between stopped cars. A woman tugged a leashed poodle toward the sidewalk. Somewhere, a siren wailed faintly in the distance. Then came the shift. It wasn't loud. It wasn't obvious. But Caleb felt it first. A flicker of movement in his peripheral vision. His foot instinctively eased off the brake. Iris leaned forward. "Did you see?" A blur. Fast, low, heavy. Before Caleb could react, before Iris could scream, something hit the back of the car with a thump, not a crash, not metal. Fur. The rear window had been halfway open, cracked for ventilation, and through that narrow gap, something forced its way in. It happened so fast, it almost didn't feel real. 1 second, the car was crawling through the sticky gridlock of Glenwood Avenue. The next, something heavy slammed into the back seat with a thud that rattled the frame. Caleb's foot hit the brake instinctively. Tires screeched. The car jolted forward and stopped so suddenly, Iris's shoulder lurched into the door. "What the hell?" she gasped, twisting around. Her scream cut through the music still playing on the radio. In the back seat, a German shepherd crouched low, wedged deep into the corner behind Caleb's seat. Dirty, soaked in mud and grime, ribs clearly outlined beneath a coat that looked more like a layer of ash than fur. His breathing came fast and shallow, each inhale sounding like it was scraping up from somewhere too deep. For a heartbeat, no one moved. The city outside continued as if nothing had changed. Cars honking, sunlight flashing on windshields, pedestrians walking past with headphones in. But inside that four-door sedan, time had stopped. Caleb blinked hard. "What the... Iris, is that a dog?" she breathed, voice shaking. "A freaking dog just jumped in." She wasn't wrong. But dog felt like too soft a word for the creature trembling just feet behind them. This wasn't some curious pet on a joyride. This was something else, something raw, desperate, wild. The shepherd didn't bark, didn't move. He was pressed into the seat so tightly, it looked like he was trying to melt into the upholstery. Ears flat, tail tucked so deep beneath him it was invisible. His eyes, muddy brown, wide, and filled with something that looked too close to terror, flicked from Caleb to Iris and back again. Caleb reached for the hazard lights. "I'm pulling over." Yeah, please do." They coasted to the curb and parked with a jolt. The moment the engine clicked off, the cabin fell into silence. Except for the panting. Not loud, but fast, unsteady, like someone who'd just run for their life and didn't know if it was over yet. Iris slowly unbuckled her seatbelt, moving like someone afraid to wake a sleeping bomb. "He's hurt," she whispered, peering closer. Caleb leaned to get a better view. The dog's side rose and fell too quickly. His paws were torn up, matted with blood and street grime. One ear was notched. A scar ran down the side of his leg, half hidden beneath filth. But it wasn't just the injuries. It was the way he shook. Not just trembling, he was convulsing. A violent, silent shiver that racked through his frame as though his muscles had forgotten what safety felt like. "Is he feral?" Caleb asked under his breath. "No," Iris said instantly. "He's scared." Caleb opened his door slowly, stepped out, and peered into the back through the open window. The dog didn't flinch, but his eyes locked onto him like a spotlight. "I'm not going to touch you," Caleb murmured. "You're okay." But he wasn't okay. Not even close. Iris turned in her seat, her hands shaking as she reached back with the gentlest motion she could manage. Hey, buddy, it's all right." That's when she saw it, the collar. Or what was left of one. A shredded, half-melted strap around his neck, frayed at the edges, caked in something dark. No tags. Just a metal loop bent out of shape. Her throat tightened. "He had someone once." Caleb's brow furrowed. "Where did he even come from?" They both looked out the back window. The street behind them was empty. No one chasing, no barking, no leash dragging behind. Just a sunlit road and a sidewalk that had already forgotten he was ever there. "He was running," Iris whispered. "From what?" The dog didn't answer, of course. He just huddled lower into the seat, as if trying to disappear between the cracks. Caleb rubbed his face. Okay. So, what do we do now?" I don't know." Iris turned to the dog again. "But we can't just throw him back out there." Caleb sighed, looking into the mirror. "He picked us." She glanced at him. "I mean, out of all the cars, all the people, he picked ours," Caleb said softly. "There's got to be a reason." The shepherd finally blinked. Just once. His eyes, once glassy with fear, softened for a fleeting second as if he understood. as if he heard that. The air inside the car felt heavier now, like the moment just before a storm breaks. Caleb stood outside the rear door, his hand frozen on the handle. Iris remained twisted around in the front seat, her body turned halfway, her heart entirely. The dog hadn't moved, still wedged in the corner of the back seat like he'd folded himself into the smallest shape possible. His body trembled so violently it made the blanket beneath him shiver. His ribs rose and fell in uneven rhythm, each breath more a survival instinct than a choice. I think he's stuck," Caleb said quietly, crouching slightly to meet the shepherd's eye. "Not physically," Iris murmured, her voice fragile. "Emotionally." She reached out again, slow and low palm up, fingers open. The dog's reaction was immediate. He didn't lunge, didn't bark. He growled. A deep, low vibration from his throat, not full of threat, but filled with warning and pain. Not "stay back or I'll hurt you," but "don't hurt me again." Iris didn't flinch. She just pulled her hand back, slow and steady, and whispered, "Okay, I hear you." Caleb opened the back door cautiously. "We should try to help him out." "No," Iris said, too quickly. Caleb paused. "We can't keep him in the car. He's not ready to move." He looked at her, then at the shepherd, then back again. The frustration in him rose, but so did something else. Recognition. He had seen people like this before. In the shelters, in the emergency rooms where his mom used to work, even in the mirror some days. That look like the world had taught you that touch equals pain and trust was just the first step to betrayal. "Okay," he exhaled. "We wait." A minute passed, maybe more. The sun dipped another inch toward the skyline, painting the dashboard in golden streaks. Iris shifted slightly in her seat, wiping a hand on her jeans. "You see the scars?" she asked, almost to herself. Caleb nodded. "They're not all from the street. Some of those are deliberate." Her voice cracked. "Someone did that to him." Neither of them spoke for a moment. Just the faint sound of the air conditioning humming and the occasional shuffle of the dog's shallow breathing. "Look at his eyes," she whispered. "They're not just scared, they're waiting." Caleb leaned closer, cautiously. The shepherd's gaze met his and held. There was something in those eyes that stopped him cold. Not wildness, not rage, something older, deeper. Like this dog had seen things no animal should see, felt things no one had tried to make sense of, and now he was curled in the back of their car, too exhausted to run, too broken to bark for help, and too proud to beg. And still, somehow, hoping. "Why us?" Iris whispered suddenly. Caleb looked at her. She wasn't talking to him. She was talking to the dog. "Why, out of all the cars, all the people, why did you pick ours?" The shepherd didn't blink, didn't move. But something shifted in his expression. A flicker, not understanding, but choosing to stay present. Iris pressed her forehead to the headrest. "He doesn't want to go back." Caleb didn't answer, but his silence spoke volumes. A distant car honked. A child laughed on the sidewalk. Life resumed its rhythm outside. But in that vehicle, something had changed. They had just become the first safe place this dog had known in a long time. "I can't make him leave," Iris said finally. Caleb exhaled, rubbing the back of his neck. "I know. Just for tonight," she added. "Just to get him safe, to figure things out." Caleb looked at the shepherd again, still pressed into the corner, still shaking, still refusing to move, but still there. "Okay," Caleb said softly. "Just tonight." He closed the back door gently, like tucking in a ghost. And just like that, everything changed. The moment they crossed the threshold of the apartment, Rook vanished. Not literally, but emotionally, yes. His body was there, curled into the tightest corner of the living room, just beside the bookshelf where the wall met the baseboard. But his presence, his spirit, it had already retreated. Caleb had carried him up the stairs in silence. Rook hadn't made a sound. No protest, no whimper, just a limp, trembling weight in his arms, heart pounding too fast, too close. Not trust, surrender. Now, beneath the soft glow of the living room lamp, he looked even smaller. No longer framed by city chaos or shock, he simply looked defeated. They'd laid down a folded comforter, a bowl of water, and some leftover chicken and rice beside him. Nothing had been touched. He hadn't moved, not even his head. Iris sat a few feet away on the floor, legs crossed, arms wrapped around her knees, just watching him. She hadn't spoken in 10 minutes. She didn't need to. The way she looked at him said everything. Caleb paced behind the couch, glancing between the clock, the dog, and his phone screen, a quiet war building under his breath. "Maybe we should, I don't know, call someone." Iris didn't look up. "Call who?" "I mean animal control. A shelter. A rescue." He rubbed the back of his neck. "He needs help, Iris. Real help." Her jaw tightened. "You think they'll come faster than we can?" Caleb stopped pacing. "I think he might have better odds with people who actually know what they're doing." That made her turn. "He picked us, Caleb," he sighed. "That doesn't mean we're qualified. He didn't choose a vet, or a shelter, or the guy at the corner with the leash. He chose our car. He jumped into it with his last ounce of strength. And that's supposed to mean something?" She looked at Rook again. Her voice dropped, soft but steady. "It means he saw something in us that didn't look like harm." Caleb didn't answer, just stood there, hands on his hips, staring down at the floor. The ceiling fan above ticked once, then again. "What if he bites?" he muttered finally. "What if he gets worse? What if we wake up and he's not breathing? We don't even know if he's sick or—" "I don't think he's sick," Iris said quietly. "I think he's broken." Caleb froze. It wasn't said for effect. She didn't raise her voice or make a speech out of it. Just stated the truth, like reading a diagnosis off a chart. "I think someone broke him," she added, "and no one's ever tried to put him back together." Caleb stared at the corner, the way Rook's body pressed against the wall like he was trying to sink through it. His ribs, his ears, the flecks of dried blood on his legs. He looked like he had no more fight left in him, but was still bracing to be hit. "I don't know how to fix something like that," Caleb admitted, softer now. "You don't," Iris said. "You just don't break him more." For a long while, neither of them said anything. Rook didn't move. Not for food, not for water. His eyes stayed open, barely blinking. He didn't even seem to notice the room around him. He just existed, breathing like a reflex, not a choice. "I've seen strays before," Iris said finally. "You know, real strays, ones born on the street. They're dirty, sure, but they're curious. They sniff around, they steal food, they bark. They don't shake like this." Caleb glanced at her. "This dog," she whispered. "This dog's been through something. He's not just surviving, he's waiting." "For what?" I don't know. Permission. A sign. Someone to tell him it's okay to stop running. Caleb rubbed his face and sat down beside her, cross-legged on the hardwood floor. I feel like we just got handed something we're not ready for. We probably did. He let out a dry, bitter laugh. Great. Iris leaned her shoulder against his. They both stared into the quiet. I was going to throw out that blanket, she said after a while. The one he's laying on. I thought it smelled musty. I almost tossed it last week. Yeah? Now it's the only thing in this apartment that matters. Rook shifted, barely. One paw twitched. His ear flicked once. Not much, but enough to know he was listening. Hey, Iris whispered gently, scooting just a little closer. You're not nothing, okay? You're not trash. Not something someone forgot. Caleb didn't speak, but his hand slowly reached out and nudged the water bowl an inch closer. The apartment was silent, save for the ticking wall clock and the occasional hum of traffic from the window. In the corner, he still hadn't moved. Not an inch. Rook, though they hadn't called him that yet, remained curled against the drywall like he wanted to fuse into it, still breathing, still shaking, still refusing the world. Iris stood in the kitchen with the fridge door open, the light spilling across the hardwood. Her hand hovered over a Tupperware container holding the leftover rotisserie chicken they hadn't touched since Tuesday. She glanced toward the corner again. He's starving, she whispered, but he's too scared to eat. Caleb leaned on the counter behind her, and we're too scared to push him. She nodded. That's why we ask, not tell. She peeled the lid back carefully, not wanting to make any sudden sounds. The smell of warm seasoning and salt filled the room immediately. A soft, savory promise. She tore a small piece of meat free, careful to remove the skin, then knelt slowly onto the living room floor, moving low, like approaching a wounded animal in the woods. No sudden gestures, no words yet, just presence. She slid the piece across the floor until it stopped about 2 feet from him. Nothing. His eyes were open. She could see them glinting in the low light, still watching, still weighing, but his body didn't shift. I know you can smell it, she said gently. Caleb stood nearby, arms crossed, heart held somewhere between hope and helplessness. He's not ready, he murmured. Doesn't have to be, Iris whispered back. He just has to want. A full minute passed, then 2. The chicken sat untouched. Iris placed another piece a little closer, then another, a breadcrumb trail of mercy. She sat back on her heels, waiting. And then, a twitch. It was small, barely perceptible. But the shepherd's nostrils flared, catching the scent. His ear flicked once, the tiniest shift in the air. Another minute, 2 more. Then his paw, just one, crept forward half an inch. He didn't rise, didn't commit. But he was thinking about it. Caleb held his breath. So did Iris. Another inch. Another. Finally, after what felt like the length of a prayer whispered in slow motion, the dog reached the closest piece of chicken. He sniffed. Then, with fragile care, he took it. Not a gulp, not a snap, just a quiet, trembling chew, like he was remembering how. Iris blinked hard. She hadn't realized tears were forming until one dropped onto her wrist. Caleb exhaled like someone had just opened a window inside his lungs. Good boy, Iris whispered. The shepherd flinched slightly at the sound, but didn't retreat. He stayed there, head low, eyes flicking toward the next piece. She pushed it a little closer. He took that one too. And the next. She smiled, her voice soft as breath. "You came in like a ghost." Caleb stepped closer, crouching beside her. "He's not a ghost," he said quietly. "He's just cornered." Iris looked at the way the dog stayed low, eyes wide but softer now, the tiniest crack of trust bleeding through the fear. "Exactly," she whispered. "Like a rook." Caleb raised an eyebrow. "In chess," she said, brushing her hair behind her ear, "the rook starts in the corner, quiet, still, but when it moves, it can cross the whole board." Caleb looked at the dog again. "Rook," he repeated slowly. The dog didn't react to the name, but he didn't turn away from it either. "I think it fits," Iris said. The silence returned, but this time it didn't feel like absence. It felt like something old and broken was starting to bend, not shatter, just bend, enough to let something new in. The clock on the microwave read 2:41 a.m. The apartment had gone quiet hours ago. No more cars outside, no creaking pipes, no soft music to drown out the silence. Just the faint whir of the ceiling fan and the light tap-tap of Caleb's fingers against his phone screen as he scrolled. He sat alone at the kitchen table, hunched over a cracked tablet and a laptop running on low brightness. His coffee had gone cold long ago, but he hadn't noticed. He wasn't searching for answers. He was searching for a name. Iris had gone to bed earlier, or at least she'd tried to. But Caleb could still hear her shifting from room to room, every so often peeking her head out, her eyes drawn back to the same quiet shape on the living room floor. Rook hadn't moved. Not really. He had curled into a tight crescent near the baseboard, nose tucked toward his belly, eyes half-lidded but never closed. Not for a second. Caleb rubbed his eyes, then typed into the search bar, "German Shepherd Canine missing Chicago area. Stray German Shepherd jumps into car. Military dog escaped program. Disavowed canine unit with scar on leg." Nothing. Every lead turned into dead ends. Adoption listings, grainy Facebook posts from months ago, Craigslist pleas from backyard breeders, vague Reddit threads that led nowhere. One article, 6 years old, described a decommissioned military canine unit in the Midwest that was shut down under ethical review. But the rest was redacted. No names, no details. Just shadows. He looked over the screen again, hoping the next refresh might reveal something new. But it never did. In the living room, Iris sat on the floor, her back against the wall, knees tucked to her chest. Her robe was slipping off one shoulder. Her hand rested near Rook, not touching, but close. Close enough to say, "I'm here, even if you can't come closer yet." She watched him breathe. It was the same every minute, same shallow rise and fall, same stiffness in his shoulders, same weight in his eyes. He wasn't sleeping. He wasn't even resting. He was waiting, as if some part of him still believed someone might come for him. Not to rescue, but to retrieve. As if this apartment, this food, these voices, was just another holding cell, another temporary stop before the next unknown. "You don't trust comfort," Iris whispered, her voice catching on the still air. "Because comfort always ended in pain." Rook's ear twitched, barely. She didn't know what he had been trained to do, or where he came from, but she could feel it, the routines etched into his bones, the way he stayed low and small even in open space, the way he never turned his back fully, the way his eyes tracked movement without ever looking directly. Someone had taught him how to survive a war, and then forgotten to teach him how to survive peace. Back in the kitchen, Caleb shut the laptop and leaned back with a groan. His neck cracked. His heart ached with helplessness. He stood and walked into the living room. Iris didn't move, just glanced up at him. "Anything?" she asked softly. He shook his head. "If he belongs to anyone, they're not looking. Maybe they never did." Caleb sat beside her on the floor, mirroring her posture. Rook didn't move, but he blinked slowly. That was enough. "I can't stop thinking about it," Caleb whispered. "About what?" "The second he jumped into our car. The way he didn't hesitate. Like he'd already decided we were the only option left." Iris nodded. "He's done this before," she said. Caleb turned to her. "What do you mean?" "I don't think this is the first place he's waited for safety." She glanced at Rook, at his still, statuesque frame. "I think he's been waiting for a long, long time. Always in corners, always watching, always hoping someone wouldn't hurt him." Caleb looked at the dog again, not as a mystery, not as a burden, but as someone who had outlived his purpose, and wasn't sure if he was allowed to start over. They stayed like that a while, three souls sharing a quiet too deep for words. And when dawn finally bled gray across the sky, Rook was still awake. But this time, when Caleb stood to stretch and Iris gathered the blanket off the couch, his eyes followed them. The bathroom light flickered slightly when Caleb flipped the switch. It always did. The fan groaned to life above, pushing warm, stale air around the small space. Iris stood just outside the door, barefoot on the cold tile, a towel draped over one arm, and a bottle of vet-recommended shampoo clutched in her hand. Rook lay in the hallway, still and silent, exactly where he had been since the early hours of the morning. His eyes were open but unreadable. His body limp, not relaxed, just empty. Caleb crouched beside him, the leash looped loose in his hand, not to control, just to guide. "Hey, buddy," he said softly. "We need to clean you up a little. Just a bit. We'll go slow. No growl, no shift." Caleb's other hand hovered, then gently rested on Rook's shoulder. He felt the muscle beneath the fur tense immediately, tight as wire. But Rook didn't pull away. That was permission enough. Iris knelt on the other side, spreading the towel along the edge of the tub. She avoided eye contact at first, not wanting to trigger anything, but her voice stayed calm. "It's warm water, nothing sharp, no loud sounds. We'll be with you the whole time." It took 3 slow, careful minutes just to coax him to his feet. And when he stood, they saw it for the first time. The full weight of what he'd been carrying, his hips trembling, his front legs wobbling slightly as if they weren't sure how to support hope. But he stood, weak, shaking, but standing. Caleb didn't say anything, just gave the leash a light tug, enough to turn Rook's body toward the open door. He moved like a prisoner who expected every step forward to be punished. But he moved, one paw, another, then a pause, a breath. Iris kept her hand low, behind him, a silent encouragement. Rook entered the bathroom and immediately froze. His pupils dilated, his ears flattened, the smell of shampoo, the tight walls, the echo of a past he hadn't asked to remember. "It's okay," Iris said, crouching near the tub. "We won't do anything without you knowing." She reached for the faucet and twisted it gently. The water poured out slow and warm. No surprises. She ran her hand through it to check the temperature before filling a small plastic pitcher. Caleb guided Rook beside the tub and knelt beside him. "You don't have to jump in. We'll do it from here." Rook didn't resist, but he didn't relax either. His body trembled so hard Caleb could feel it through the leash, Then came the first pour. The warm water slid over his back, soaking through the dust, grime, and dried blood. For a second, his entire body, locked like muscle memory, told him to expect pain next. Iris whispered gently, "You're okay. It's just water. That's all." Rook didn't flinch again. Caleb reached out with a cloth, beginning to work at the dirt along Rook's neck, revealing the natural black and tan of his coat underneath. As the filth rinsed away, so did the illusion that this was just some stray. He had been something once. Under the matting, under the street, there were signs, scars that didn't come from alley fights or car brushes. One in particular caught Caleb's attention. On Rook's left shoulder blade, barely visible under damp fur, was a faint brand. It wasn't large, but it was there, pressed into the skin long ago. Some sort of code or emblem, partially obscured by scarring and fur regrowth, but unmistakable. Caleb leaned closer. "Iris." She looked over and followed his gaze. Her breath caught. Someone had marked him, not like a pet, like property. She didn't ask what it was. She didn't have to. The silence in the room answered for them both. Caleb didn't press it. He just moved the washcloth gently across the scar, rinsing around it with quiet reverence like washing a gravestone. The room smelled like soap and warm water now, but beneath it, something else lingered, a quiet, shared understanding that this dog had been through things they'd never fully grasp. And yet he was letting them touch him, letting them help. That was a miracle. Iris lathered the shampoo between her hands and worked it through Rook's chest fur. He didn't pull away. His eyes didn't dart wildly. He simply stood, trembling, alert, but still. She leaned closer, her voice low. "Good boy, Rook. You're doing so good." The name landed between them like a promise. Caleb whispered it too. "Rook." And for the first time, the dog blinked, slowly, not startled, not afraid, just present. It wasn't peace, but it wasn't panic either. And for a dog like Rook, that was everything. The sun had climbed higher by late morning, spilling warm, forgiving light across the apartment floorboards. The kind that made things look cleaner, calmer, more ordinary than they really were. Rook lay near the foot of the couch, his damp coat now brushed and slowly drying in soft patches. Iris had placed a clean towel under him, and for the first time since he arrived, he hadn't retreated to a corner. He hadn't moved either, but his stillness felt less like fear now, and more like listening. Iris sat cross-legged nearby, sketchpad resting on her knees, her pencil making soft, rhythmic strokes. The quiet of the room was different today. Not heavy like the night before, just waiting. Caleb was in the kitchen, fixing coffee, his mind still lingering on the brand he'd seen on Rook's back. He hadn't brought it up again, not out loud, but it sat with him like a truth that had yet to grow teeth. "I think he likes music," Iris said softly, not looking up. Caleb poured water into the kettle. "You play something?" "No, just been humming a little. He's not trembling as much when I do." Caleb glanced over. Rook's body was still tight, coiled, but his ears twitched now and then, following Iris's rhythm, not retreating from it. "You're winning him," Caleb murmured. Iris gave a tired smile. "I'm not trying to win him. I'm just letting him borrow the quiet." The kettle began to whistle, and that's when it happened. A sharp bang, metallic, sudden, violent. The pot Caleb had set on the stovetop had slipped, striking the floor with a piercing clang that echoed through the room like a gunshot. Time splintered. Before either of them could blink, Rook moved. Fast, brutal, immediate. His body launched forward, not away from the noise, but toward Iris. She froze as 100 pounds of muscle and instinct pressed against her, hard enough to knock the sketchpad from her lap. Rook's chest was in front of hers, one paw braced on the floor, the other half curled near her leg. His body covered hers, not attacking, not collapsing, shielding. Caleb spun around from the kitchen. "Rook!" But the dog wasn't reacting to him. His eyes were locked toward the source of the sound, his ears pinned flat, teeth clenched, but he didn't growl, didn't lunge. He just held position like a soldier under fire. Iris's breath caught. She didn't move, didn't speak. Her hands hovered, palms open. "Hey," she whispered, trembling. "It's okay. I'm okay." Rook didn't blink. She brought one hand slowly to her chest, then let it fall gently against the side of his neck. "I'm not hurt," she murmured. "You don't have to protect me." A full 5 seconds passed before he shifted. Not much, just enough to pull his weight back, his paw retreating an inch, his body lowering from combat stance to something closer to collapse. But his eyes stayed locked on the kitchen, waiting, assessing. Caleb crouched low, both hands open. Hey, bud. It's okay. Just a pan. Just a noise. No danger." Rook didn't seem to hear him, not at first. His breathing came shallow and tight. Iris could feel his ribcage rising and falling under her hand, his body still buzzing with alertness. And then finally, slowly, the muscles began to release. He stepped back just 2 paces and curled into a crouch, not retreating, just decompressing. Caleb whispered, stunned, "That wasn't panic." Iris nodded. "No, that was training." Caleb looked at her, then at the dog. "That was tactical positioning," he said. "That was learned behavior. He didn't protect himself. He protected you." Iris looked at Rook, at the way his chest still heaved, but his eyes flicked between them now, less guarded than before. She felt something burn in the back of her throat. "He's not just traumatized," she said. "He was taught to take the hit." Caleb sat back on his heels, jaw tight. "This isn't a stray." "No," Iris whispered. "This was someone's soldier." The room was quiet again, but this time it wasn't peaceful. It was full of realization and guilt and something deeper. Recognition. Rook lay down slowly, head between his paws, not breaking eye contact. And for the first time his eyes weren't asking for escape. They were asking, "What now?" The apartment felt quieter than it had in days, not because there was less sound, but because the noise inside their heads had slowed. The incident with the pan still lingered in the air, invisible but undeniable. Iris had sat on the floor for nearly an hour afterward, her back against the wall, eyes drifting toward Rook every few minutes. He hadn't moved far. Now he lay stretched halfway between the living room and hallway, not in a corner, not behind furniture, not hidden. He had chosen the open. It wasn't nothing. As dusk settled outside and the windows turned blue with the last light of the day, Iris folded a new blanket in her arms. Thick, soft, fleece-lined. One of the good ones they usually saved for movie nights or winter storms. She held it like it was something sacred. "He needs a spot," she said quietly, glancing at Caleb. Caleb nodded from the kitchen, where he was rinsing out a cup. Make it his. She laid the blanket down in the center of the room, not next to a wall, not tucked under furniture, just there in the open. An invitation. Then she sat back, palms open in her lap, and waited. Rook stayed where he was for a long time, his body still low to the ground, watching. Iris didn't speak. She just glanced at him every so often, her body loose, unthreatening. She hummed, softly, barely audible, the same melody she'd hummed the night before. And then he moved, not quickly, not confidently, but with intention. One paw forward, then the next. He approached the blanket the way someone approaches a bed they don't believe they deserve. He sniffed it once. Then, slowly, delicately, he lowered himself onto it. His body curled tight at first, coiled in the same familiar shape of retreat. But this time, something shifted. He stretched out one front paw, then the other. Then, gradually, his hind legs uncurled, and in one silent, reverent motion, he let himself melt into the blanket. Iris felt her breath catch. Rook lay still for a moment, head resting on the soft fabric, his chest rising slowly. And then finally, his eyes closed. Not just blinked, not just lowered, closed. Caleb stood in the doorway, arms folded, barely daring to breathe. It was the first time they had seen him asleep. Truly asleep. No half-alert posture, no twitching ears, just rest. Iris reached slowly for her phone on the nearby table, tapped it open, and turned the screen to silent. She didn't take a picture. She just locked the screen and let it rest face down on the floor. "This is what safe looks like," she whispered. Caleb's voice was quieter than the ceiling fan. "Yeah." Later that night, when the apartment had gone dark and Caleb's steady breathing filled the bedroom, Iris remained awake, curled on her side, her eyes drifting toward the soft light bleeding in from the hallway. She could still see the edge of the blanket from here. She could still see the rise and fall of Rook's chest. And when she finally fell asleep, the dreams came. They weren't nightmares, not exactly, but they weren't peaceful either. She saw cages, long, narrow rows, concrete floors, the sound of metal gates sliding shut, dogs pacing, others silent, some staring straight ahead like they didn't know how to look anymore. She saw a figure walking between them. A man, clipboard in hand, no warmth in his face, only selection. She saw one dog at the end, ears pinned, tail still, brown eyes wide but quiet. Rook. And she saw him looking at her, not in panic, but in recognition, like he'd been waiting. And somehow she had walked into the dream too late. She jolted awake just before dawn, her chest tight, her mouth dry. The hallway was quiet. She tiptoed to the living room, heart pounding. Rook was still there, still on the blanket, still breathing, still home. She sat beside him in silence, curling the edge of the blanket over his paw like tucking in a child. "You're not in a cage anymore," she whispered. And this time she didn't dream at all. It was mid-afternoon. The kind of day where sunlight poured through the windows in long golden slants, warming the hardwood and softening the edges of everything it touched. Rook lay near the couch, one ear twitching now and then as Iris quietly folded laundry at the dining table. Caleb was in the bedroom, tinkering with the old AC unit again, still refusing to admit summer had already won. The apartment was quiet, save for the rustle of cotton, the occasional thump of a falling sock, and the hum of domestic peace. It was, for a fleeting moment, normal, until it wasn't. 3 sharp knocks, loud, sudden, close, exploded against the front door. Iris jumped. Rook barked. Not once, not twice. Just one loud, jarring snap of sound, short and violent, like a shot fired on instinct. Before Iris could even turn toward him, he was gone. Under the table, pressed into the shadows like a switch had flipped in his brain. Head low, tail curled so tight it disappeared, chest heaving, eyes wide. He was shaking, not trembling, not nervous, shaking like something had crawled out of his past and wrapped around his spine. Iris's breath caught. "Rook," she said softly, stepping away from the laundry, her hands still holding a folded shirt. Hey, it's okay. It's just someone at the door." No response. His eyes didn't move. He wasn't listening to now. He was locked inside then. Caleb appeared in the hallway, eyes narrowing. What happened? Someone knocked. Rook pressed deeper into the corner beneath the table. "Too loud," Iris said. "It was too loud." She crouched down slowly, dropping the shirt beside her. She didn't crawl toward him, didn't call his name again. She just sat, quiet, present. "It's okay," she whispered. "No one's coming for you." He flinched when the neighbor knocked again, this time lighter, more casual. "Hey, you good?" a voice called from the other side of the door. "Sorry, just checking on the power thing." Caleb moved to the door, cracking it open with a nod. "Yeah, all good. Thanks, man." The door shut softly. But it didn't matter. Rook was gone. Not physically, but inside he had retreated behind whatever wall had once kept him alive. Iris reached a hand out, palm flat on the floor. "No one's hurting you here. Not today. Not ever again." Rook's ears twitched. His ribs moved like they were made of wires. That's when she saw them again. The scars. They curved along his hind legs in parallel lines like burns or friction wounds. Old, healed over but never truly forgotten. Another ran across the inside of his front leg, just above the paw, thin, too straight to be accidental. Iris swallowed hard. Her voice was barely a breath. "Those aren't from the streets." Caleb crouched beside her, his expression darkening as he knelt low enough to see under the table. "They're patterned," he said. "Even. Repeated." Iris nodded slowly. "They're not random." Caleb didn't speak for a long moment. Then he murmured, "They're uniform." The word hung in the air like a verdict. Rook didn't understand the language, but somehow he understood the silence that followed. His body curled tighter. Iris, still seated, slid the corner of the blanket toward the edge of the table, just enough that it brushed Rook's paw. He flinched. Then, slowly, let it stay there. They waited. They didn't try to coax him out. Didn't touch him. Didn't beg. They just stayed. And somewhere in that stillness, a quiet kind of courage formed. A kind that didn't ask for anything in return. That evening, when the sky turned a soft burnt orange and the shadows stretched long, Rook finally crawled out from under the table. He didn't lift his head. He didn't meet their eyes. But he lay beside the blanket once more, still tense, still fragile, but not hidden. And sometimes showing up again is the first act of healing. The clinic smelled like antiseptic and quiet worry. Faint hints of rubbing alcohol mixed with lavender cleaner clung to the air like ghosts of past patients. The walls were soft beige, lit by flickering fluorescence, and the receptionist gave Caleb a tight, polite smile when he stepped in, carrying the dog that wouldn't look anyone in the eye. Rook didn't fight. He just lay still in Caleb's arms, muscles taut but silent. His weight was deceptive heavier than he looked, like sorrow had settled in his bones. "This won't take long," Caleb whispered, more to himself than the dog. Dr. Talia Eng met them in exam room 2. She was in her 40s, calm-eyed, with years of wear in her posture and a voice that rarely rose above necessity. She looked at Rook the way only someone who's seen too much and still shows up every day can look, not with pity, with respect. "He yours?" she asked as Caleb gently set Rook down on the exam table. "Not officially," Caleb said, "but he chose us." Eng raised an eyebrow but didn't question it. She slipped on gloves, moving slow and non-threatening. "Name?" "Rook," Caleb said. She nodded, then reached for the scanner. Rook flinched as it came near his shoulder, his body tightening like he expected it to hurt. Eng paused. "He'll be okay," she said softly, letting the beeping device hover an inch above the fur. "Just checking for a microchip." "Won't touch him." Rook stayed frozen. The scanner beeped, then again, then a long, steady tone. Eng looked down at the reader, her brows furrowed. "What is it?" Caleb asked. She didn't answer right away. Instead, she walked to the counter, typed the string of digits into her system, and stared at the screen. Her expression changed, froze, then darkened. She turned around slowly. "Where did you say you found him?" Caleb straightened. "He jumped into our car, out of nowhere. We brought him home." Eng didn't speak for a beat, then quietly, "This dog is tagged as property of a government training program." Caleb blinked. "Like police?" "No." She turned the screen toward him. On it was a string of black text, no photo, no name. Just a series of numbers, a scan date from 5 years ago, and a line that made Caleb's stomach drop. K9R07, status, missing. Project terminated Dominion Tactical Program, defunct. "Dominion?" Caleb asked. Eng nodded grimly. "You won't find much. The program was disbanded, buried mostly." "Why?" She looked back at Rook. He hadn't moved. Eng's voice lowered. "There were allegations, abuse, excessive conditioning. Dogs were used for black-level fieldwork, urban conflict, covert extraction, not just detection. They weren't trained for homes. They were trained for hell." Caleb felt his throat dry out. "He's not just a rescue," he murmured. "No," Eng said. "He's a survivor." She leaned against the counter, arms folded now. "These dogs, they weren't supposed to be adopted out. Most were destroyed when the program fell apart. The few that went missing, they're ghost files. No press, no rescue logs. They were marked unrecoverable." Caleb stared at the monitor. "And this one, R07, still flagged, still missing, until now." He looked at Rook again. His body curled in the corner of the table, tail tight, face averted. "How did he get out?" Caleb whispered. Eng shook her head. "That's the wrong question." Caleb met her eyes. "The real question," she said, "is how far he ran." The house was still when it happened. Late evening, post-dinner quiet, dishes already stacked, the hum of the dishwasher filling the space with a soft, mechanical lullaby. Caleb stood at the bathroom counter trying to organize the small box of first aid supplies they'd pulled out earlier. Just a quick clean-up, some gauze, ointment, and a few antiseptics they hadn't used in years. Iris was in the living room sorting through a stack of old blankets, her eyes flicking toward Rook every so often. He was curled on the floor near the window, chest rising and falling slowly, eyes half-lidded but aware, always aware. Caleb reached for the brown bottle of rubbing alcohol, not noticing the loose cap. The bottle slipped just enough to hit the edge of the counter and tumble. It struck the floor with a sharp crack, the plastic creasing inward, splattering liquid across the tile. A sharp tang hit the air instantly. Rook moved like he'd been shot. A full-body jolt, legs scrambling, claws scraping the hardwood as he launched backward into the kitchen, slamming into the lower cabinets with a thud. His breath came ragged, erratic. He tried to crawl, but there was nowhere to go. "Rook!" Iris cried out, already on her feet. But he couldn't hear her. His world had collapsed into panic. The scent, the sound, the memory. Caleb froze, the bottle still spinning near his feet. "I didn't mean to—" "I know," Iris snapped, already kneeling near Rook. "It's not the sound, it's the smell." Rook was shaking violently, his head tucked under his chest, back legs crumpled beneath him. His eyes were wild-dilated and vacant at once, locked on something they couldn't see. Something he could. Hey, Iris whispered, lowering her body onto the floor, crawling slowly across the tile. "Rook, it's okay. You're safe. It's not the same." She stopped a few feet away, palms flat, voice soft. She didn't reach for him, just spoke, steady, calm, a lifeline through the fog. "That smell, it's not going to hurt you here. It's not like before. No cages, no pain. Just us." Caleb knelt behind her, his voice hollow. He reacted like it burned. "Because it did," she whispered. "Back then. It must have." She looked up at him. "It wasn't just used to clean. They used it as part of whatever they did to him." Rook let out a low whimper, not a bark, not a growl, just a sound made of memory. Iris's heart fractured. She reached out slowly, just her fingers at first, letting them rest on the edge of the mat near Rook's trembling paw. "You're not there anymore," she whispered. "Whatever they did, it's not happening again." Rook's head didn't lift, but his breathing changed, less erratic now, still sharp, but slowing. Iris stayed there, motionless, letting silence hold the space between them. Then, carefully, Caleb reached behind him, grabbed a towel, and slid it over the small pool of alcohol on the floor, covering it like a wound. "I'll throw it out," he said quietly. "The bottle. All of it." Iris didn't respond. She just kept whispering. Minutes passed. Long, slow, aching minutes. And finally, Rook shifted. Not much. Just enough to slide his paw forward until it touched the tips of Iris's fingers. She didn't cry, but her chest rose once, sharply, like holding back something too human to speak in that moment. "That's it," she whispered. "You're not what they made you. You're more than that." Caleb sat back on the floor, staring at the dog, this creature who had flinched at kindness, shielded others from danger, and shattered at a simple scent, and still chose to stay. "I don't think we've seen even half of what they did to him," he murmured. "No," Iris said softly, "but we've seen what he isn't." Caleb looked at her. "He isn't broken," she continued. "He's scarred, but he's still trying." Rook didn't speak, of course, but his eyes blinked once slowly. And this time they weren't wide with fear. They were tired. Tired, but awake. The leash was soft leather new, untangled, and still creased from the packaging. Iris turned it over in her hands, tracing the brass clip with her thumb as if memorizing its weight. "You think he's ready?" Caleb stood by the door, boots laced, one hand in his pocket. "No, but I think he'll go anyway." They both looked over at Rook. He was lying near the center of the room, head on his paws, eyes half-lidded, not from sleep, but from waiting. Always waiting. Iris knelt slowly, holding the leash like a question. "Rook," she said softly. "Want to try going outside?" His ears twitched at the word, but he didn't move. She held the leash up, let it dangle low beside her knee. "Just for a few minutes. We'll stay close. Just you and Caleb." Still nothing. Then, like a switch slowly being flicked, Rook stood. Caleb stepped forward. "Easy," he murmured. Rook didn't flinch, but he didn't wag either. No tail movement, no spark of recognition, just motion, precise, silent, automatic. Iris clipped the leash gently to the harness they'd slipped over him earlier in the day. Her hands moved with practiced care. No sudden tugs, no tight grip, just contact. When the click sounded, Rook froze, mid-step. His body stiffened, not in panic, but in paralysis, as if that sound had echoed deeper than it should have, as if it reached into a place no one could see. Iris's voice softened, barely audible. "It's okay. You're not being called to task." He blinked. Once. Caleb opened the door slowly, letting the early evening breeze drift into the apartment. "Come on, bud. Just down the block and back." Rook moved, not like a dog excited for a walk, not with curiosity, not with joy. He moved like he had been ordered. Each step was careful, silent, measured. Caleb glanced down at the leash in his hand. Rook wasn't pulling, but he also wasn't exploring, not sniffing, not pausing to look around, just walking in step, exactly in step, 2 feet behind. To the left. Caleb's throat tightened. "Something's off," he muttered to Iris as they stepped out onto the sidewalk. She nodded from the doorway. "He's not walking. He's complying." The sound of the city evening wrapped around them. Cars passing, a dog barking 2 blocks over, someone laughing on a distant balcony. But Rook moved like none of it touched him. A ghost on a leash. They made it halfway down the block. Rook never pulled once, never broke stride. Caleb could have walked him without holding the leash at all. He stopped near a lamppost and crouched beside him. Rook didn't look at him. "Hey," Caleb whispered. "You can sniff if you want. You can lead." Nothing. Just the faint rise and fall of breath. Caleb's hand hovered near the leash clip. "If I unhook this, are you going to disappear?" Rook blinked. Slowly. Then, without warning, he sat. It wasn't relaxed. It wasn't natural. It was like a drill response. Caleb sat down too, right there on the sidewalk. "You don't have to follow orders out here," he said. "No one's watching. No one's grading you." He looked at the dog beside him, not wagging, not watching squirrels or tracking sounds, just present in the most clinical way. "They trained it out of you," Caleb said quietly. "Curiosity. Choice." He reached up and gently unclipped the leash. Rook didn't move, didn't bolt, didn't panic, just sat there. Caleb let the leash fall to the pavement between them like a discarded chain. For 5 full minutes, man and dog sat in the hush of the fading light. Neither spoke, neither moved. Then, with a slight shift of his head, Rook turned, just an inch and looked at Caleb. Not long, not with expression, but it was something. And when Caleb stood to walk home, Rook followed. No leash, still no wag, still no pull. But he followed, not because he was told, but because for the first time he chose to. It was nearly dusk when the knock came, a gentle thud-thud at the door. Not aggressive, not startling, but enough to pull the apartment out of its late afternoon lull. Iris looked up from the couch, where she was scribbling into her notebook with the fading end of a pencil. Caleb, in the kitchen, paused mid-pour with the kettle in his hand. The tea bag in his mug swayed slowly in the steam. Neither of them moved right away. And then Rook did. In one smooth, calculated motion, he rose from the rug near the window, crossed the room silently, and placed himself between Iris and the door. No sound, no snarl, just position, low, steady, deliberate. Iris froze, pencil still in hand, heart skipping a beat, not in fear of him, but at the clarity of the instinct, the certainty in the way he moved. Caleb set the kettle down and approached, voice low. "It's just Mason," he said, glancing through the peephole. Iris stayed seated. "He's never seen Rook." "I know." Caleb opened the door slowly. Mason, mid-30s, with kind eyes and a chipped front tooth from college hockey, stood with a bottle of ginger ale in one hand and a half-grin already forming. "Hey," he said. "Figured I'd stop by. You said you were running low on whoa." He took half a step back. Because Rook didn't move, still silent, still stationed directly in front of Iris. Mason blinked. "That's the dog?" Caleb nodded. "Rook." Mason didn't reach out. Smart. "Okay," he said softly, eyes on Rook. "Got it. I come in peace." Still, Rook didn't growl. He didn't bare his teeth or lunge. He just watched, eyes alert, shoulders firm, tail low but not tucked. His stance wasn't fear. It was readiness. A quiet vow written in posture. "If you cross that line, you'll have to go through me." Caleb placed a steady hand on Rook's back. "It's okay, bud. He's a friend." Rook didn't flinch, but his breathing slowed just a little. Mason stayed in the doorway, bottle still dangling from his hand. "You weren't kidding," he said, half laughing. "He's not a pet. He's a perimeter." "Yeah," Caleb said, "but he didn't growl." Mason nodded. "That means something." Caleb stepped aside, motioning gently. "Come in slow. No sudden moves." "I know the drill," Mason muttered, then smiled more for Rook than anyone else. He stepped inside, cautiously. Rook shifted just slightly, adjusting his position so he remained between Iris and the newcomer. Caleb noticed, not out of fear, out of choice, out of habit. Iris finally stood. Her hand brushed Rook's side. "It's okay," she said softly. "He's good?" Rook glanced at her, then at Mason. Then he stepped back. Not far. Just enough to allow space between them. Just enough to stay watching. Mason walked to the kitchen, placing the bottle on the counter. "He's like a bodyguard with PTSD, he whispered. "Because he is," Caleb replied quietly. They all knew it. Rook paced once near the door, then circled back to Iris and lay down near her feet. Not touching, just close enough. Mason's voice softened. "He didn't attack. That's a win, right?" Iris nodded. "A big one." Caleb watched Rook settle, eyes still alert, chest rising and falling steady now. "He's not reacting," he said. He's assessing. Mason tilted his head. So, not a stray? Caleb shook his head. Something more. Rook blinked, slow and quiet, as if he understood. As if this was all part of the drill he never signed up for but could never stop following. And yet, for the first time in days, he wasn't under the table. He was watching over. The apartment had long since slipped into silence. The kind of hush that only comes when the world outside has given up its noise, and even the city seems to pause for breath. Iris lay awake in her room, her body still but her mind restless. She had left the door slightly ajar, not out of habit but because of him. She wasn't sure what she was waiting for, only that something in her chest ached with a kind of quiet anticipation. The hallway beyond was dim, lit only by the amber glow of a streetlight seeping through the blinds in the living room. The air was cool, still. Not even the floor creaked. Then she heard it. Soft pads against hardwood, slow, measured, hesitant. She sat up, careful not to make a sound. Her breath caught. Rook. He stood just beyond the doorway, only half in the light, his figure still as shadow, head low, ears angled back. Not afraid, not aggressive, just unsure. Iris didn't speak. She didn't move. Then, gently, without sound, she swung her legs off the bed and sat on the edge, feet on the floor, palms open, no reaching, no pleading, just offering, the way you might offer a truth too fragile to say aloud. Her hand extended slightly, fingers relaxed. Rook stood still. Seconds passed, slow and infinite, and then he moved. Not fast, not close. Just enough. He stepped forward, only one paw, then another. Eyes steady, shoulders stiff, until the tip of his nose was inches from her fingers. And there, so delicate, she almost didn't feel it. He nudged her hand. A whisper of contact. No lick. No lean, just a nudge. Then just as silently, he turned and walked away, back into the shadows, back into the stillness. But something had changed. Iris didn't call after him. She didn't move. She just sat there, staring at her hand. And in the place where his nose had touched her skin, she felt warmth. Not physical, emotional, like a door had opened, not wide, but enough to see a light flicker inside. She blinked slowly, her throat tightening. He hadn't stayed, but he'd come, by choice. That night, she didn't dream of cages, or command words, or blood on the snow. She dreamed of a dog standing in a hallway, afraid of being wrong, but more afraid of never trying. And somewhere beyond walls, beyond wounds, beyond training, a bond had begun. Not claimed, not forced, offered. Caleb had always known how to navigate gray areas. Years on the force taught him there were places the public couldn't see. Files that didn't live in clean folders or on government websites. Places where truths were buried, not lost. He stared at his laptop, the blue light reflecting off tired eyes. Beside him, Rook lay curled on the rug, head resting on crossed paws, ears twitching faintly with every passing car. It was just past 2 a.m. Iris had gone to sleep hours ago, but Caleb's mind couldn't. Too many pieces, too few answers. He opened an encrypted channel and typed a message. Private message. Caleb Ward, You still owe me for pulling you out of that DUI mess in 17. Time to return the favor. I need access to non-public canine records, military-linked, codenamed Dominion, dog ID, K9R07. He hit send. 5 minutes passed. Then 10. Rook didn't move. Finally, the screen pinged. Incoming message. Private. Lieutenant Garrett. What the hell did you just step into? Caleb's pulse kicked. Caleb. Just tell me what you found. Garrett. Dominion was bad news. Off-books training unit. Not military, not police. Some kind of federal private hybrid. Black Ops. Caleb. I figured. Garrett. Project was buried after an internal investigation. Whistleblower got silenced. Dogs were decommissioned. Caleb. What does that mean? Garrett. Most didn't make it out. The ones that did weren't meant to be found. There was a pause. Then Garrett dropped the file. It wasn't large, but it felt heavy. Caleb clicked. A grainy PDF opened. Half the pages were redacted, thick black lines striking through names, dates, procedures. The headers were still legible. Project Dominion. Tactical Canine Experimental Unit. Oversight redacted. Status terminated. Reason internal ethics violation class. A breach. His stomach turned. He scrolled until he found the ID list. R01, presumed deceased. R02, deceased. R03, behavioral collapse. R04, failed extraction. R05, destroyed in training. R06, destroyed post-deployment. R07, missing. Presumed deceased. The screen seemed to pulse with that line. Presumed deceased. But the dog was right there, chest rising and falling slowly on the floor beside him. Breathing, watching, alive. Caleb exhaled through his teeth. He clicked deeper into R07's sub-file. There was barely anything. Only 3 things weren't blacked out. Handler, redacted. Deployment, classified. High-risk, civilian zone. Note, refused termination protocol after failed final mission. Escaped custody. Considered compromised. He sat back, staring at the screen. Escaped. Not abandoned, not lost. He glanced down at Rook, still not asleep, still aware, but calm. Some part of him still waiting for the next command, the next order, the next betrayal. Compromised, Caleb whispered, because you survived. He reached down slowly, brushing his hand against Rook's neck over the place where the faint brand was hidden under fur. The dog didn't flinch this time, didn't pull away, just stayed. Garrett sent one last message. Garrett, you didn't see this. I didn't send it. Don't go digging. Some things were buried for a reason. Caleb, and some things were buried alive. The diner was almost empty, except for a tired waitress, a flickering neon sign in the window, and the smell of burnt coffee that clung to the linoleum. Caleb sat across from a man who hadn't touched his cup. Mid-50s, wiry frame, skin pale but weathered. His left forearm bore a puckered, melted scar that trailed under the cuff of a frayed military green jacket. The man kept one hand around the mug even though he hadn't taken a sip since sitting down. Rook lay silently beneath the table. The man hadn't said a word until now. Then, he remembered me. His voice cracked in the middle. Not from age, from something older than age. Caleb's eyes narrowed. "You're sure?" "I wish I wasn't," the man muttered. "You don't forget those eyes. But it's not the look that gives it away. It's what he didn't do." Iris leaned forward gently. "You worked with him?" The man gave a half nod. "Worked with all of them. Dominion had 6 techs. 3 quit. 1 drank himself to death. 1 disappeared. And me, I talked to ghosts." He looked under the table. Rook hadn't moved, but his eyes were open, locked on the man's hands, not tense, not calm, just vigilant. "R07, the tech murmured. They called him Ghost Handler in training logs, not because he was silent, but because commands stuck to him like hauntings, like he couldn't let them go, even when he wanted to. Caleb felt a chill. "We found a partial file. Redacted. We saw the term termination refusal." The man laughed a dry, bitter rasp. "That's their language for he disobeyed, for once. He didn't attack a child holding a dead man's switch, so they shocked him. Again, until he collapsed. They dragged him back to base, sedated him, branded him." "Branded?" Iris's voice shook. The man rolled up his sleeve. "They tested it on me first. Said they needed to make sure it burned fast enough for live tissue." The scar glistened faintly under the diner light. Iris looked away. "Dominion was never about training dogs," he said. "It was about breaking them, turning loyalty into reflex. They had something called the kill switch protocol. Embedded commands spoken, signaled, sometimes even triggered by tone or scent. Once you engaged it, the dogs stopped thinking. They went cold. Shut down. Obey. No matter what." Caleb's hand clenched on the table. "Did anyone stop it?" The man shook his head. "They stopped themselves," he said quietly. "One by one, refusing commands, refusing to eat, turning their backs in cages. You call that disobedience. I call it conscience." He looked at Rook again. "This one, R7. He held on the longest. Not because he was strongest, but because he didn't want to leave his handler. Even after..." He stopped. Even after what? No one asked. The man reached into his coat and slid a small envelope across the table. "I kept this. Shouldn't have. But I couldn't forget him. Footage. Notes. You'll see what they tried to erase." Caleb took it without a word. The man finally stood. "Don't ask me for more. I gave you what matters. The rest, if you dig deeper, be ready for what digs back." He started walking out, but paused near the door. "He's not broken," he said, not turning around. "He's waiting for someone to tell him he's free." Then he was gone. Rook, still beneath the table, blinked slowly. His eyes didn't leave the door. The apartment was dark, save for the soft hum of Caleb's laptop and the glow that danced across his face. He hadn't said anything since they got home. Iris sat beside him on the couch, arms folded, breath shallow. Rook lay curled by the door, eyes half closed but alert, as always. Caleb inserted the flash drive. A folder opened with a single label, R07 Final. No timestamp, no watermark. Just silence before the first frame clicked into life. The screen showed a desert training compound harsh light, chain link fences, makeshift barracks in the background. A younger Rook stood poised, clean, powerful. His coat gleamed under the sun, eyes sharp, breath steady. A voice off camera gave a single command. Rook sprinted toward a staged target. Not once did he hesitate. Another clip. A soldier trapped under debris. Rook digging, barking, then lying down, tail thumping as the man reached for help. That tail wag, Caleb noticed it. Bright, instinctive, still unbroken. Landmine detection, medical alert, extraction under fire. He did it all. Each clip was a testament. Precision, loyalty, bravery. Until the final footage began. No intro, just dust, movement, screams off screen. A soldier held a rifle, pacing nervously behind Rook. Ahead, a child 8, maybe 9, stood frozen near the entrance of a crumbling building. Something glinted in his small hand. The voice barked a command. "Engage!" Rook didn't move. Another command, sharper. Still, nothing. Instead, he stepped sideways, positioning himself between the soldier and the child. "Engage, R07!" The handler cursed, stepped forward, about to grab Rook's collar. The screen cut. When it faded back in, Rook was in a metal pen, muzzle on, legs shaking. His ears lay flat, and his tail was tucked so far it was invisible. Then came the shocks. Not visible, but you could see them in his body. The jerks, the collapses, the way he whimpered through the steel bars, still trying not to bark. The video ended with silence. Then a final frame. Project Dominion. R07, non-compliant. Status, inactive. Caleb didn't breathe. Iris wiped at her eyes, but the tears came faster. "He was the best," she whispered. Rook stirred from his place by the door, slowly walked over, not wagging, just present. He placed his head on Caleb's knee, didn't look up, didn't ask for anything. Caleb looked down at him, voice hoarse. "You weren't defective." His hand hovered, then rested gently between Rook's ears. "You were just human." Iris didn't speak, but she reached for the mouse, clicked one button copy to desktop, and renamed the file. He chose Mercy. The living room was unusually quiet that evening. Caleb stood near the bookshelf, holding a small notebook filled with scribbled military codes and commands. Iris sat cross-legged on the floor, sipping tea, watching Rook stretch out on the rug in the fading light. They had found the notebook buried inside the flash drive's metadata, an old scan of command sequences used during Project Dominion. It wasn't much, just phrases, short, sharp, unfeeling. Caleb hadn't said anything since reading them. He just stared at the page. Then, without warning, he called out, "Alpha! Down! Hold!" The effect was instant. Rook jolted to attention, like a switch had been flipped. Muscles taut, spine rigid, ears perked to perfect alertness. And then he dropped, flat, muzzle to floor, motionless, eyes wide open but empty, drained. His tail didn't twitch. His breath was shallow, measured, robotic, like a ghost had entered his body and hollowed him out. "Rook," Iris whispered. No response. She moved toward him slowly, carefully. But he didn't lift his head. He didn't blink. It wasn't obedience. It was something colder, older, a reflex etched too deep. "Caleb," Iris said, voice trembling, "turn it off. I didn't know it would—" He looked panicked now, stepping forward. "Rook, release. Stand down. It's okay. You're safe." Nothing. Iris dropped to her knees beside Rook and gently placed her hand on his paw. He didn't flinch, but he didn't feel present either. She leaned close, her voice barely a whisper. You don't have to do that anymore. No one owns your voice now. And something barely noticeable shifted. A blink, a slow inhale. Rook's ears lowered. His body loosened just slightly. But the damage was done. Caleb sat down hard on the couch, guilt pressing into his shoulders. That command, it's from the list. I just wanted to see if he remembered? Iris snapped. He remembers everything, Caleb. That's the problem. Silence fell again, thick, heavy. After a while, Rook slowly pushed himself up, not with urgency, but with reluctance, like a man rising from a grave he never asked to be buried in. He walked past Caleb, didn't stop, didn't make a sound. He just returned to his corner, curled up, and turned his back to the room. Caleb exhaled, staring at the notebook like it had become radioactive. Those words, they're still in him. They were wired into him, Iris said, softer now. But so were instincts. And somewhere under all that programming is a dog who wanted to protect, not obey. She looked toward Rook. His body was still, but his eyes awake, watching. And for the first time, she didn't just see fear there. She saw exhaustion, the exhaustion of fighting a voice that once controlled your every breath. The next morning, Iris didn't speak to Rook. She hummed. A soft melody drifted through the small kitchen, an old folk tune her mother used to sing when words weren't enough. No lyrics, just breath and tone, filling the quiet like sunlight spilling through sheer curtains. Rook lay curled near the back door, head on his paws, still, guarded, but his ears twitched at the rise and fall of her voice. She didn't make eye contact, didn't approach, just let the music flow through the room as naturally as the morning breeze. Day after day, she repeated the same ritual. Music, space, no commands. No tests, only invitation. And slowly, something shifted. The first time he lifted his head during a melody, she didn't react. The second time, his eyes followed her as she moved from stove to table. And on the third, when she paused mid-hum, he let out a soft huff, almost like asking her to continue. She did. But this time, she paired the tune with her hands, open palms, gentle gestures, no pressure. It was clumsy at first, like trying to speak a dialect neither of them fully knew. But something in Rook understood rhythm, understood patience, understood that this language came without a price. One evening, as the sky bled gold behind the windows, Iris sat cross-legged in the living room, a small bowl of water by her side. She tapped twice on the floor, then opened her hand fingers up, palm out. Rook stared, not at the treat, at her. Then, without cue, without signal, he rose, walked slowly over, and lay down beside her. Not from obligation, from choice. She didn't speak, she didn't praise, she just breathed, steady and soft, letting the moment speak for itself. The next morning, Caleb watched from the hallway as Iris moved through a simple routine, humming a few notes, tapping her hand once on the counter, then pointing gently to the door. Rook followed the motion, not mechanically, but with alertness, curiosity, trust. He's learning a new language, Caleb murmured. No, Iris replied, stroking the side of Rook's face. He's remembering the old one, the one before the commands. Later that week, while rain painted the windows and the world felt far away, Iris sat again in the center of the room, cradling a warm mug between her hands. She was about to rise when she felt it, a soft pressure on her knee. She looked down. Rook's paw rested there, light as a whisper. Not seeking food, not awaiting instruction, just presence. Her hand moved slowly, gently resting atop his. Their eyes met, and for the first time he didn't look like a ghost. He looked like a dog, still healing, still guarded. But here, by choice. The storm rolled in like something remembered, low rumbles at first distant and unthreatening. Then came the lightning, jagged veins across a bruised sky. By the time the thunder cracked overhead, Rook was already gone, not physically, but inside himself. Iris found him curled beneath the dining table, body pressed so tightly into the corner it looked like he was trying to disappear. His chest heaved, eyes wide, unblinking, every muscle locked. A sound broke from him, barely audible, like breath being strangled. Not a growl, not a whimper, a fracture. She didn't call his name, didn't reach for him. Instead, she knelt down beside the table, slowly, deliberately, lowering herself until her cheek touched the cold hardwood floor. Rain battered the windows. Thunder cracked again. Rook's whole body flinched. Iris pressed her hand flat on the ground, just inches from his paw. "I'm here," she whispered, so soft it barely left her lips. "I see you." No response. "You're safe." His breathing hitched. "You're not property." His ears twitched barely, but they heard her. "You're not alone." Another rumble shook the house. Rook jerked again, trying to pull deeper into the dark. So Iris did something no one had ever done for him. She lay completely down, heart to heart, spine to the storm, no shield, no commands, only presence. For minutes long and aching, they stayed like that. The world outside roaring, flickering, drowning in noise. Inside, silence. Until finally, Rook shifted. His paw inched forward, just enough to touch her wrist. Iris didn't move. She just let her fingers curl ever so slightly, inviting contact, not demanding it. Then, with a trembling breath, Rook let out a sound barely there, a broken sigh, and his head dropped. Not in fear, but surrender. His body uncoiled, inch by inch, legs no longer tucked in defense, shoulders no longer rigid. He rested against her like gravity had found him again. And for the first time in what must have been years, he closed his eyes in the dark. Iris stayed like that for a long time, tears sliding into her hairline, soaking into the floor. Not from sadness, from something quieter, something like awe. Because this wasn't just comfort. It was the moment the dam broke. Not with noise, but with trust. It didn't come as a dramatic howl or a rush of movement. There was no cinematic swell of music, no triumphant bark echoing into the night. Just a single breath, a slow, trembling exhale from Rook as he lay curled on the floor beside her. His chest rose, fell, rose again, and then stilled. Not in fear, but in surrender. Not the kind that means giving up, the kind that means giving in, trusting the ground to hold you, trusting the silence to be safe. Iris had stayed by his side for hours, legs folded, back pressed to the cabinet, her hand resting palm up between them. She hadn't moved, hadn't coaxed, just breathed beside him. And somewhere in the quiet rhythm of two heartbeats learning how to speak to each other, something shifted. A wall crumbled. Quietly. Finally. Because this wasn't about obedience, wasn't about tricks or training or forcing healing into a timeline. This was something older, something harder. This was about being allowed to stay. He shifted closer, not much, just inches. Enough for his paw to brush her ankle. Enough for her breath to catch. She didn't reach, didn't flinch. Just let her tears come. Silent, warm, the kind you don't even know you're crying until your shirt is damp. Because this was the moment. The real one. Not when the leash first slipped over his head. Not when the toy squeaked or the tail wagged or the microchip beeped with a ghost of his past. This was the moment he said, "I'm still here," not with words, with presence, with breath, with a body that had learned to brace for cruelty, now learning how to lean into kindness. Caleb stood in the hallway, watching through the crack in the door. He didn't step forward, didn't dare, just watched as his wife and this broken, beautiful dog found each other in the middle of the night. And for the first time, Rook closed his eyes, not because he was exhausted, not because he was shutting the world out, but because, for a fleeting, miraculous second, he believed it would still be there when he opened them again. And that was everything. The road turned to gravel long before the GPS gave up. By the time Caleb pulled off the path entirely, the sun had begun its descent, casting long shadows across the clearing ahead. No signs, no fence, just a grove of weathered pines and the sound of wind stirring through dry leaves. "This is it," the man had said, the retired handler who whispered the coordinates like a confession. "It's not official, never was. But some of us, we remembered." Caleb opened the passenger door. Rook didn't jump out. He stepped, slow, deliberate, as if something in the air had changed, grown heavier. He sniffed once, then again, then began to walk. Iris followed silently, her boots crunching over pine needles. No one spoke. The deeper they went, the more the woods began to change, not visually, but atmospherically, like memory hung here. And then they saw it. At first glance, it could have been mistaken for nothing, just uneven ground and a half-rotted fence post. But then the details emerged, rocks arranged in rows, some with names scratched in crude letters. Bravo, Sasha, Tango 4, no name. Others bore only symbols, a paw print, a number, a single nail hammered into the dirt. Iris's hand found Caleb's without looking. There was no government plaque, no flag, no glory, just loss left to rot in anonymity. But someone, some broken-souled someone, had been here. Flowers, faded and brittle, sat in mason jars. A chewed-up collar was draped over a branch. A child's drawing flapped against a twig. And there, at the far end, set slightly apart, stood a stone newer than the rest. It bore no words, only a series of numbers etched with care. R07 Rook froze. His tail stopped. His ears dropped, not in fear, but in knowing. He walked to the grave with a gait Iris had never seen before, not cautious, not obedient, but mournful. He stood still before it, his body tense yet unmoving, not sniffing, not pacing, just remembering. Caleb knelt beside him. "He was here," he murmured. "They buried him." Iris looked at Caleb, confused. "He's not dead?" she whispered. "No," Caleb said softly. "But someone needed to believe he was." They stayed like that for a while. The trees whispered stories no one had written down. The wind pressed against their backs as if urging them to listen harder. Rook didn't sit. He didn't lie down. He simply stood, like a soldier on guard for his fallen. When they turned to go, Rook didn't follow. He placed his paw deliberately on the soil, and then finally, gently, lowered himself, tail still, eyes forward, silent. The diner smelled like burnt coffee and worn leather booths. Caleb stirred his mug with a spoon that had long since lost its shine. Across from him sat a man with a weathered face and a trembling hand that hadn't touched his drink. Name tag on the chest, Nolan Grant, former rank, handler, Project Dominion, Tier 2. The moment he saw Rook lying outside by the truck, Nolan went pale. "That's him," he said under his breath. "God help me. That's R07. Caleb didn't confirm or deny. He just waited. Iris sat silently, notebook closed. This wasn't for documentation. This was for truth. Nolan rubbed his hands together like he was trying to erase something that had soaked too deep into the skin. "They told us he ran," Caleb said finally. "Went feral. Dangerous." Nolan laughed once, sharp, bitter. "Of course they did." Silence. Then the truth cracked open. "He didn't run," Nolan said, his voice low. "They left him." Caleb looked up slowly. It was a coastal base. Storm coming in hard that night. Everyone was being relocated, classified stuff, total shutdown. But Rook, he'd refused a command during an exercise earlier that week. Wouldn't attack a civilian actor holding a child. That was the second time. They said he was defective. Iris swallowed hard. Nolan's hand curled into a fist on the table. Captain Voss ordered him crated, no sedative, no handler. Said someone would pick him up after the convoy moved out. His voice cracked. But no one came back. A gust of wind tapped against the diner window like a memory knocking. "They left him locked in that crate for 3 days in the storm," Nolan continued. "No food, no blanket, nothing." He looked down. "I should have stayed behind. I should have said something louder. But I didn't." He finally met Caleb's eyes. "You want to know the truth? We thought he'd be dead. But when a cleanup unit went back a week later, the crate was open. Empty." Caleb sat still. "He broke out?" Iris whispered. Nolan shook his head. "No. There was no damage to the crate. The latch was undone from the outside." "Then who?" she started. "I don't know," he said, "but I've wondered every day since." He slid a folded piece of cloth across the table. A collar, torn, weather-stained. The faded stitching read, "Property, K9, R07. I found it hanging on the fence a week after the site was cleared, like someone or something left it behind on purpose." Outside the diner, Rook lifted his head as if the air had shifted. Caleb stood, his jaw tight. "He didn't run. He waited. And they gave up." Nolan looked ashamed. "They didn't want dogs who made moral choices," he whispered. "They wanted weapons." Rook was more than they could handle. As Caleb opened the door to leave, Nolan called after him. "He wasn't defective." They paused. "He was the only one who remembered who he was." Caleb nodded once. "So do we." The old laptop flickered to life in Caleb's lap, the soft hum of the fan whispering beneath the silence of the room. Iris sat beside him on the couch, arms wrapped tightly around her knees, eyes never blinking. Rook lay at their feet, head resting on the floorboards, unaware of what they were about to see, or maybe not. His body was still, too still, like he knew this silence. Caleb opened the last file on the flash drive. Video file, R07, cam final, op, AVI. The screen burst to life in the dull gray palette of combat footage. Static buzzed, then shapes formed. Soldiers moving cautiously through a ravaged village, the dust thick in the air, gunfire echoing in the far distance. And Rook sleek, strong, whole-moving with precision at a handler's side. His vest was cleaner then, his eyes sharper. But even through the grainy cam feed, the same quiet intelligence radiated from him. He wasn't a pet. He wasn't just a dog. He was mission-born. Caleb watched as a soldier ahead dropped to the ground sniper fire. Chaos followed. Barked orders, scrambling, and Rook. He didn't run. He lunged forward, shielding the fallen man with his body, pressing against his chest, tail thumping in frantic rhythm as bullets struck the dirt nearby. Iris gasped softly. Rook didn't flinch. Another shot rang out. The screen trembled. The camera caught a single second Rook's head turning slightly, scanning, evaluating, then lowering as if to whisper something only the wounded man could hear. Seconds passed. Reinforcements moved in. Smoke clouded the lens. And then, quiet. The final image before the screen cut to black. Rook, wagging his tail. Just once. Subtle. Controlled. Hopeful. Then, nothing. No mission complete. No good boy. No handler's voice. No recall. No release. Just a screen that went black, like he'd been erased. Like his final act never mattered. Caleb exhaled. Iris wiped at her eyes with her sleeve, barely breathing. Rook shifted slightly on the floor, eyes fluttering open. He didn't look at the screen. He didn't need to. He remembered it in his bones. "He thought he did good," Iris whispered. He waited for someone to say it. But no one ever did. Until now. Caleb leaned down, gently placed a hand on the thick fur between Rook's ears. "You did good," he said quietly. "You did better than any of us deserved." And for the first time since they'd found him, Rook let out a low, slow breath. The kind of breath that carries the weight of years. The kind that sounds like a soul unclenching. Morning light slid through the windows like warm honey, brushing against the old hardwood floor and pooling quietly where Rook lay by the fireplace. He wasn't asleep. He rarely ever truly was. But this time, his eyes weren't haunted. They were just resting. Iris sat at the table, her fingers tracing the edge of a small wrapped box. It wasn't much. No frills, just brown paper and twine. But inside was something that had taken her days to decide on, and years, maybe lifetimes, for him to deserve. Caleb leaned on the kitchen doorway, watching her with a silent kind of reverence. "You sure he's ready?" he asked. Iris nodded. "He doesn't have to be. We are." She knelt beside Rook. The old wood creaked under her knees. "Hey, love," she whispered. Rook's ears perked. Slowly he lifted his head. He didn't scramble away like he used to. He didn't freeze like a statue. He simply watched her, calm and aware, like he was reading her pulse through her voice. She opened the box. Inside lay a collar-soft, worn leather, dyed a deep brown like the bark of a tree still standing after the storm. No tags, no chains, no metal clinks or harsh edges. Just one thing, pressed into the leather in quiet, unwavering letters. Rook. That was it. No barcode, no code number, no rank or unit. Just his name. Iris held it up gently. "You don't belong to anyone anymore," she said softly, voice trembling at the edges. "You belong here." Rook didn't flinch, didn't cower. He simply leaned forward, as if offering her his neck not in submission, but in understanding. Iris looped the collar around him, careful, slow. She buckled it and let her fingers rest there a moment longer than needed. It fit. Not too tight, not too loose. Like it was meant for a dog who finally had nothing to prove and everything to become. Caleb stepped forward, lowering himself beside them. "Looks good on you, buddy." Rook turned to him. Not sharply, not from habit. Just turned, looked, held the gaze. And then, without a cue, without a command, he let out a low, content huff and rested his head on Iris's lap. For a long time, no one said a word. Outside, the wind stirred the chimes. The world kept turning. But here, in this quiet little room where nothing remarkable seemed to happen, something had. A collar was just a collar, unless it meant freedom, unless it meant you made it home. The toy had been sitting in the basket for weeks, a stuffed fox-cheap fabric, half-faded, with stitched eyes and a squeaker in its belly. It was a leftover from Iris's impulse stop at a pet shop the day after Rook arrived. Back then, the idea of him playing had felt naive, like bringing a bouquet to a battlefield. But today was different. The house was quiet. A soft drizzle tapped the windows, and in the living room a candle flickered against the gray of late afternoon. Rook lay by the hearth, paws tucked, ears relaxed, eyes half-lidded. He didn't startle at every creak in the wood anymore. He didn't scan for exits. He just rested. Caleb was folding laundry, distracted. Iris, barefoot, moved about the room humming softly. Something wordless but warm. And then, on her way past the toy basket, her hand brushed the stuffed fox. It let out the tiniest squeak. Rook jolted upright. Not violently, just alert. Caleb froze mid-fold. Iris held still, barely breathing. Rook stared at the toy like it was some ancient relic, half memory, half mystery. Then slowly, stiffly, he rose. He approached, not as a predator, but as a stranger meeting something unknown. His paw came forward first, then a nudge of the nose. The toy squeaked again, louder this time. Rook jerked back, and they waited. Waited for the usual response. The recoil, the flinch, the retreat. But it didn't come. Instead, Rook tilted his head. He nudged the toy again. Squeak. And then a low, curious huff from his chest. Then a tiny flick. His tail. It moved, once, barely noticeable. But it moved. Then again. A little higher, a little looser. Wag. The sound that came from Iris wasn't quite a sob. Not yet. Caleb set the laundry aside and dropped to his knees. "Oh, my God," he whispered, eyes burning. "He's playing." Rook bit the fox gently, backing up like a puppy unsure of the rules. He dropped it, watched it bounce, then pounced, clumsy, unsure, but trying. He squeaked it again, ears perked, his mouth opened, tongue out, not panting, not distressed, smiling. Iris sank to the floor beside Caleb, hand over her mouth. Tears ran freely now, but neither of them spoke. because this wasn't about the toy, it wasn't about the wag, it was about the choice. Rook had chosen to be curious, not cautious, had chosen to respond with wonder, not fear, to explore something soft, something pointless, something safe. He lay on his side now, toy between his paws, eyes watching them with quiet contentment. Caleb leaned close to Iris and whispered, "That tail. It's like the first time someone laughs after a funeral." She nodded. "It means we haven't lost him." Outside, the rain fell softly. Inside, for the first time, Rook made a sound low, breathy, between a whine and a sigh. It wasn't distress. It was relief. The park was nearly empty. Golden light draped across the grass like a soft shawl, warm but not overbearing. The kind of evening that made even silence feel alive. Iris stood at the edge of the open field, the leash coiled loosely in her hand. Caleb was beside her, hands in pockets, heart pounding with something he couldn't quite name. Rook stood between them, tense, ears high, tail a faint blur of uncertainty. The world stretched wide in front of him, trees in the distance, a scatter of birds overhead, and space, so much space. No walls, no commands, no threats, just air and possibility. "Ready?" Iris asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Caleb nodded. She unhooked the leash. For a second, just one, Rook didn't move. His chest rose and fell, his paws twitching in place. And then he ran. Not away, not in fear, but toward something unseen. Legs extended, muscles fluid, like remembering a language his body hadn't spoken in years. The grass kicked up behind him, sun glinting off his coat. He didn't look back. Not yet. Iris held her breath. Caleb watched silently. This was the test, the real one. And then, far ahead at the edge of the clearing, Rook stopped. He turned, looked at them, ears perked, chest heaving. And then, without hesitation, he ran back. Full speed, straight for them. Not chasing, not fleeing, returning. He skidded to a halt just before Iris, tongue out, panting, tail wagging like he'd just found the thing he'd been chasing his whole life. Then, without any command, he did it again. Out. Pause. Back. Over and over. A rhythm. A ritual. A statement. "He's not surviving anymore," Caleb said, eyes full, voice rough. "He's living." Iris laughed through tears, dropping to her knees as Rook bounded toward her again. She held out her arms. This time he didn't hesitate. He crashed into her, not with weight, but with joy, not obedience, not duty, but choice. He nuzzled her cheek gently, as if her skin were made of something sacred. The touch wasn't urgent, it wasn't desperate, it was knowing. Then he turned to Caleb, eyes soft, ears low, and gave a quiet huff, barely audible but weighted like a whispered prayer. Not in words, but in something older, something wordless. It was a thank you in a language made of breath and memory, of bruised loyalty and quiet survival. A language only those who've come back from the edge can truly understand. Neither of them said anything. They didn't need to. The wind rolled over the tall grass in lazy waves. The light from the sunset caught on Rook's fur, tracing gold into the gray. He blinked up at the sky like someone trying to remember how peace feels. Then, without prompting, without command, he moved slowly, deliberately, and sat between them. No leash, no commands, no walls, no gates, no hidden pain behind his posture, just presence, just a dog. He licked the inside of his paw once, then rested his chin on it. The kind of movement that didn't mean exhaustion, but comfort. The kind that says, I don't have to run now. Iris reached over, not to pet him, not to coddle, but to simply let her fingers graze the soft space between his shoulder blades. A gesture that asked nothing and gave everything. Caleb leaned back, his hands behind him in the grass, watching the sun sink like a slow exhale. For once, his thoughts weren't chasing headlines, data, or the what-ifs of buried military files. He was just here, with her, with him, with the kind of silence that heals. A hawk called out from the tree line. Rook's ears twitched, but he didn't get up. He didn't brace or scan or brace for orders that would never come. He just watched the bird vanish into the orange sky. Then his gaze returned to the grass in front of him. Ordinary, beautiful, still. It was the stillness they noticed most, the absence of pacing, of panting, of checking every door frame for escape routes. He was no longer surviving the day. He was living it. And maybe, for the first time in a life full of tasks and trauma and torn loyalties, that was enough. To just be. To exist not as property, not as asset, not as weapon or tool, but as something far simpler, something far more profound. A dog, their dog. Not because they owned him, but because he chose to stay. The last rays of sunlight caught in his eyes like tiny fires, distant and dying, but warm just the same. And as the shadows stretched out over the field, one truth settled between the three of them, unspoken but understood. Sometimes the bravest thing a soul can do is stop running and let itself be seen. The lobby of the county animal shelter smelled faintly of disinfectant and hope. Outside, the sun filtered through frosted glass in strips, casting pale rectangles onto the linoleum floor. Rook sat between Caleb and Iris, calm, composed. His new leather collar snug around his neck, soft brown, untagged, but no longer nameless. The receptionist handed over the final form. "Sign here," she said gently. "This makes it official." Caleb glanced at Iris. She nodded. His pen met paper. Rook, breed, German Shepherd, status, adopted. It was done. Rook was no longer stray, no longer missing. He was home. The shelter worker leaned over the counter to sneak a glance at the dog. "He's beautiful," she said, "and calm for a shepherd, especially one with scars like that." She stepped around the desk and knelt. "May I?" Caleb gave a small nod. Rook remained still, gaze soft but alert. The woman gently lifted his back leg. Her eyes caught the faint, faded brand beneath his fur. The letters barely showed anymore, but the shape was unmistakable. Her face shifted, a flicker of something like recognition, or maybe disbelief. She looked up. "I've seen that mark before." Caleb stiffened. Iris reached for Rook's paw, grounding herself in the warmth of his presence. The woman didn't press. She stood slowly, voice quiet. "Years ago, there was a whisper about a facility. Dogs trained for tactical use off the books. Some came through here. None were in this good a shape." She looked down again, softer this time. "He's one of the lucky ones." Rook tilted his head at her. His tail gave one gentle thump. The woman smiled. "Thank you for seeing him. Not just taking him, seeing." Iris's voice cracked just a little. "We didn't rescue him. He found us." The woman nodded. "They usually do." She reached for a small folder, slipped a printed certificate inside, and handed it across the counter. On the front, in gold letters, "Welcome home." Outside the shelter, the wind was light. Birds scattered overhead as Rook stepped off the concrete and onto grass. He paused, looked up at the sky, then forward. Iris crouched beside him. "No more cages," Caleb added. "No more silence." And with that they turned toward the car three figures, walking not as rescuers and rescued, but as a family. It was the same dream, same snow, same silence, same flickering sky above a frozen landscape that stretched on forever. Iris stood in the clearing again barefoot in the cold, breath clouding in the still air. The wind howled through the pine trees like a memory trying to be heard. She braced herself, because in every version of this dream, he ran away. The same dog, the same outline in the dark, fur matted, eyes haunted, body trembling as it bolted into the void, chased by shadows she couldn't see, only feel. That's how it always went. But tonight, something shifted. The snow still crunched beneath her feet, but the wind was warmer. The sky was not black, but violet. And the dog, he didn't run away. He ran toward her, fast, joyful, powerful. A sleek figure against the fading dusk, his ears pricked forward, his tail cutting clean lines through the air as it wagged, truly wagged, not out of nervousness or habit, but joy. Light bloomed at the edge of the forest, not fire, not explosions, sunrise. He bounded through the snow, paws kicking up little flurries of silver, and when he reached her, he didn't flinch, didn't cower. He leapt into her arms. They both fell into the snow laughing, and she realized she'd never laughed in the dream before. Rook licked her cheek once and curled up beside her. He was warm now, not hollow, not scarred by ice or orders or cages. She reached for his collar. No numbers, just his name, just Rook. The sky above them blushed pink, and for the first time the dream didn't fade in fear. It lingered, held, breathed. Iris awoke with tears slipping gently down her cheek, but not from sorrow. The blanket had slipped from her shoulder. She reached for it and paused. Rook lay beside her bed, not on the floor, but halfway up on the mattress, his head resting where her hand had fallen. His eyes were open, soft, and when he saw her looking, he didn't move away. He nudged her fingers with his nose, just once, like in the dream. She smiled through the lump in her throat. "You came back," she whispered. Rook exhaled through his nose and let his eyes close. The morning light crept gently through the curtains. Outside, the world moved on. But in this moment, inside this small, quiet room, something had reversed. Not just a dream, a story, a soul. A dog who was once made to obey was now learning to simply be, and beside him, the woman who had once feared breaking him was now ready to walk with him into whatever came next. The morning was soft, the kind that arrives not with noise, but with light. Pale gold spilled through the kitchen windows as toast clicked in the toaster, and coffee brewed in silence. Outside, a breeze rustled through the leaves like a lullaby that forgot it used to be thunder. Rook lay curled at Caleb's feet, paws tucked neatly beneath his chest, his breathing steady and deep, not guarding, not flinching, just there. Iris leaned against the doorframe, a steaming mug in her hand. She watched Caleb as he knelt to scratch behind Rook's ears. Gentle now, always checking first, always asking permission without words. The dog didn't move, only leaned in. "You ever wonder," Caleb said softly, "why he picked us?" Iris tilted her head. "What do you mean?" "That day. The window. He could have run anywhere, any car, any direction." There was a pause, not heavy curious. Iris walked over, crouched beside them. She ran her fingers down the worn edge of Rook's collar. The one she picked, the one without numbers or titles or scars. Just a name, just Rook. "I think," she whispered, "he didn't jump in because he wanted to be rescued." Caleb looked at her. She looked at Rook. "I think he jumped in because he wanted to be seen." They sat in silence after that, not the kind that aches, but the kind that listens. And as if he understood the moment, Rook slowly got up, stretched, and trotted toward the front door. Not with urgency, with ease. They followed. Outside, the old car still sat under the maple tree, its paint dulled by time, but its back window still cracked open. Just enough. Rook stepped up onto the back seat like he'd done it 1,000 times, and maybe in his mind he had. He sat, calm, then turned his face toward the breeze and looked out that same window, not with fear, not with flight, but with peace. The kind that only comes when the running stops, not because you're too tired to flee, but because you've finally found something worth staying for. The wind tugged gently at his fur. His eyes blinked slowly, as if memorizing this quiet, this place, this choice. Iris stepped closer. He's not looking for a way out anymore. "No," Caleb said, voice low. "He's remembering how he got in." They stood there a moment longer. 3 souls, 1 porch, no leashes, no cages, no commands, just presence. And as the screen faded to black, the last image remained. A German shepherd, once abandoned, once programmed, once lost. Looking out the window he had chosen, not to escape through, but to arrive by. Not all rescues wear capes. Some come on 4 legs, with silent eyes that carry stories too heavy for words. Rook's journey isn't just about a dog. It's about what happens when we stop seeing brokenness and start seeing worth. German shepherds like Rook are more than symbols of loyalty and strength. They are mirrors reflecting our pain, our hope, and the healing we didn't know we needed. His scars remind us that not all wounds are visible and not every hero gets medals. Some just need to be noticed, chosen, loved. This story is a reminder. There's always someone waiting to be seen, not saved, not fixed, just seen. And sometimes, when we open a window or a heart, we make space for something extraordinary to leap in. So if you ever get the chance, be the one who doesn't walk away. Be the one who sees the quiet ones in the corner, the ones who flinch at kindness. Because in choosing them, we often find the missing pieces of ourselves. Kindness isn't weakness. It's what saves us. And sometimes it all begins with a window and a dog who dared to believe someone was worth trusting again.